Hello, and welcome to Sarah's Baked Goods. Today we're going to be making Paczki, which is the only Polish dessert I know how to say properly. And what they are is jam-filled donuts. They are amazing, just the best. So what we're going to start by doing is putting our milk, our salt, and our vanilla together and scalding it. What this does is it enhances the flavor of the vanilla inside the milk. And there's a scientific reason. The whey, which is the fat in the milk, or the proteins in the milk, start to fall apart a little bit, which helps not thicken your dough. It's hard to explain. Just know that when you scald your milk, you're going to get a better flavor, and the texture of your dough will be slightly different. And that's what we want. So once we have that milk scalded, we're going to let it cool down in a container so that we don't want to cook our eggs when we mix everything together. Then we're going to measure out our butter, melt it, and again, just like all the times I've melted butter for these Polish desserts, we want it to be melted but not hot. We want it to be warm because, again, these eggs are delicate. We don't want scrambled eggs in our donuts. We want a beautiful dough. So we're gonna put all our flour together. And the interesting thing about this donut is it's a yeast donut, which makes it extra difficult, which you'll find out later on. We're going to put all our yeast and flour together. The reason it gets more difficult is because now there's yeast making air bubbles and stuff. And when you bake or fry that, you sometimes can get big giant pockets of nothing because there was a bubble. So be very careful with that. We're going to mix the sugar in there as well. Just like so. Feed that yeast. And we're going to start by putting in the milk. Just like so. Make sure you get all that in there. We're going to mix it up before we put anything else in so we can start activating that yeast and get it alive before we add in the butter and the egg, because we don't want to kill everything. So just a little bit of mixing, just like so. Again, we're just trying to get the yeast alive and well. Add in that egg. Make sure you get everything in there. This is why I always have a clean hand and a dirty hand, so that I have my clean hand to grab everything, and I can still use some tools with my dirty hand and get everything good. You see how I waited on the butter? It's because the butter is not hot, but it's still warm, and I'm just making sure that the eggs are mixed in first. There we go. Again, make sure you get everything in there. The reason I mixed that butter quickly first before I got everything in there is because, again, heat is very important. Don't cook those eggs. And now that it's slightly mixed in, you don't have to worry. Now this is a very rich dough, obviously, because it's a donut dough. So be extra careful not to put any more flour in. You will need some bench flour to knead it, but again, be very careful. So once we get all this out of the bowl, we're just going to knead it nicely into a ball. Put all our dirty dishes off to the side and we can wash those later. There we go. It's going to be very wet and soft. It says a lot of butter, eggs, milk, and not as much flour. Just slowly mix until it becomes a nice ball like this. Every once in a while, just rub your hands like this to make sure you get off all the dough so that all of that can be put back into your ball. This recipe is for 12 donuts. And we're going to be using plum jam to fill, which is a very regular, basic paczki. The other basic and regular paczki that is quite common is rose jam as well. And I'll probably do that next time I try this recipe. I'll probably put rose jam in there. And then you're just going to go until it bounces back to the touch. Just like that. Now just form it back into a nice little ball. And put it off to the side. There we go. And then we're going to just wrap it and let it double in size. Now be very careful with this recipe because if you have the oil when you fry too hot, you're going to burn the outside and have it raw in the middle. If you have it too cold, the oil's going to soak into your donuts and just be gross. So just be careful with that. That's a precursor to tell you what's about to happen. I'm going to have my oil too hot. It's not going to burn the outside, but it's going to be a lot darker than it should be. And it does affect the taste, which was a bit of a mistake. But that's okay. You got to experiment and make sure you understand each recipe. We're going to weigh this out and figure out how much I need for 12 pieces. So whatever the weight is, divide by 12. It ends up being about 80 grams. 88 grams, I believe, actually. So we're just going to cut out 80 grams per piece. If it's a gram off or a gram below, it's going to be fine. So just keep doing that until you have 12 pieces. The other thing is, if I made this recipe slightly smaller, and I had my oil as hot as I did, it wouldn't have been a problem because the inside would have cooked perfectly fine. But because I made them this big, I should have had the oil slightly less. Now when we're rolling these into a nice ball, you want to do the grip and then slowly grip everything onto the bottom to make that nice butt on the bottom, just like that. Now, remember, do not have flour on your station. You want this to stick to your table so that it can make that butt on the bottom. If you don't let it stick to the table, it's just going to be a mess and it's just going to look super ugly. Just like that. Perfect. So you're just going to do this for all 12 and then put them on your tray, just like this. And before you proof them, put another tray on top and just press down. Keep pressing. Just keep going. Because you just work with them, the gluten is really strong. And if you just press down and take it off, the gluten will put its shape back to averagely what it was. And you want discs right now. And this is just the quickest way to do it. So keep going. I take a look at them. That's a nice little disc. Some of them are trying to bounce back to balls, so I'm going to just press a bit more. Perfect. Now I'm going to leave the tray on so that it stays in a disc. They'll be strong enough to proof with a light tray on top of them, so don't worry. But you see that what I just did was I put a tiny bit of water, the absolute tiny bit of water on my fingers and flicked it into my oil to see how hot it is. You can use this technique only if you don't have a thermometer. And I wanted to show you this so that in case you didn't have a thermometer, you can still do this recipe without worrying. So you're just going to put as many as you want in here. Don't go crazy though. If you put too much, it will cool down the oil, and when the oil gets soaked into a donut, it gets it super greasy and gross. So you want it to be this color, which would be perfect. But because I made them super big and I had the oil too hot, they got to this color way too early, and the inside was raw when I opened two of them. So what you'll see on later on when I roll it in the sugar is it'll be a lot darker, and it's because I had to cook it a little longer, which still works, but it doesn't taste as good. So you see how dark that is? It's fine, but you'd way rather prefer that beautiful golden color for looks and for taste. Now, after you take them out of the oil, wait 30 seconds for the oil to relax and drop off, and then roll it in your sugar. If you wait any longer, the sugar won't stick as well, and if you go too quickly, the oil will just soak up all the sugar. Now, because this was a yeast donut, you can see how that area is open. It's because I had a bubble there and the skin peeled off. So just keep that in mind when you're baking. If you see any big bubbles, make sure you try and squeeze them out as best you can, or you'll get that. Again, not a problem if you're baking at home, but for a business, you want consistency, you want it to look good, and you want it to taste good. So this was a mess up on my part, but in the end, I'll be able to fix it and hopefully keep this for my bakery later on. Now, I put plum jam that I bought from the Polish store in my town, just so that I made sure it was super authentic. And that's it. That's all it takes for these beautiful donuts. Now, again, a reminder, this was mistakes, so this isn't what it should look like. It should look slightly more golden brown and less black. But at least these ones aren't burnt and they are still tasty. If you've liked this video, please like and subscribe. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I even have my own website. Thank you, and have a nice day.